No more bullshit. No more bullshit.
An American freed from Russia. Tonight, here the first images of American teacher Marc Fogel, seen on his flight back home. The U.S. has said for years he was wrongfully detained after his arrest for having medically prescribed marijuana. He was serving a 14-year prison sentence. The Trump administration tonight saying they negotiated an exchange. President Trump was asked what Russia got in this deal. Here's Jonathan Karl tonight.
Pennsylvania teacher Marc Fogel is back on American soil tonight, free at last after spending the last 3.5 years in a Russian prison. Fogel was arrested in Moscow in August 2021. Airport surveillance video shows the moment a police dog flagged Fogel's luggage, leading to a search. Fogel's family says he was carrying a small amount of medically prescribed marijuana, but he was sentenced to 14 years in a penal colony. Fogel's 95-year-old mother, Malphine, said she received a surprise call from her son this morning with the news he was finally coming home.
We just need to get him home and hug him and hold him, and I think there'll be a lot of tears.
The White House says Fogel was freed as part of an exchange with Russia. Tonight, when our Rachel Scott asked President Trump what the U.S. gave the Russians in return, he didn't directly answer, but talked about the need to end the war in Ukraine.
Not much. No, they were very nice. We were treated very nicely by Russia, actually. I hope that's the beginning of a relationship where we can end that war. Everybody knows Marc. He's become a very famous guy. He's a very happy guy tonight, so it's just a real honor, an honor to have you at the White House.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now. And I want you to know that I am not a hero in this at all. And President Trump is a hero. These men that came from the diplomatic service are heroes. The senators and representatives that passed legislation in my honor to get me home are the heroes. I am in awe of what they all did. My family has been a force. I think my 95-year-old mother is probably the most dynamic 95-year-old on earth right now. And I am so indebted to so many people. I think I remember a Churchill quote that he said when the RAF was fighting the Luftwaffe, and he said that never have so many owed so much to so few. And I put myself, fortunately and unfortunately, into that category. And I said, never has one owed so much to so many, that this superorganism of people that came to my support and the love that I was given sustained me for 3.5 years in a prison, that had me in hospitals for more than 100 days. I was given more than 400 injections in that time. And knowing I had the support of my fellow Pennsylvanians, my family, my friends, it was so overwhelming that it brought me to my knees and it brought me to tears, but it was my energy, it was my being that kept me going that whole time. And I will forever be indebted to President Trump, to Steve over there. What a dynamic man this guy is.
That's true.
When I met him, the energy, the can-do attitude just exudes from his body. And when he smiled at me and introduced me, and I got the feel for what has happened, you know, it's not just me, it's everybody. And Secretary Rubio, who met my son a while back, I'm a middle-class school teacher who's now in a dream world.
We're going to show you the Lincoln bedroom in a little while. It's a very special place. Appropriate for tonight, I think. Very appropriate.
And thank you all. And I love our country. And I'm so happy to be back here. And I wish I could articulate it better.
You've done beautifully, and he's got a great mother. And when I saw the mother at a rally, she said, if you win, will you get my son out? And I promised. She's 95 years old. And I said, we'll get him out. And we got him out pretty quickly.
She told me that exact words.
I remember.
And,
she made quite an impression.
And you also did.
Yeah.
And I'm in awe of what you've done and your team.
It's great to have you back. Gonna have a great life.
Well, it looks like President Trump is not, in fact, in for a penny. Over the weekend, he issued an executive order instructing the US Treasury to halt production of the 1-cent coin.
Trump wrote on Truth Social, "For far too long, the United States has minted pennies, which literally cost us more than 2 cents. This is so wasteful. I have instructed my Secretary of the U.S. Treasury to stop producing new pennies. Let's rip the waste out of our great nation's budget, even if it's a penny at a time." Right after President Trump's inauguration, Doge wrote on X, "The penny costs over 3 cents to make and costs us taxpayers over $179 million in fiscal year 2023. The mint produced over 4.5 billion pennies in 2023, around 40% of the 11.4 billion coins for circulation that were produced."
Back in 2013, then, President Barack Obama also expressed his support for axing pennies. Let's watch.
Yeah, we remember our piggy banks and counting up all our pennies and then taking them in and getting a dollar bill or a couple of dollars from them. And maybe that's the reason why people haven't gotten around to it. I will tell you that you're right. This is not going to be a huge savings for government, but anytime we're spending more money on something that people don't actually use, that's an example of something we should probably change. It's one of those things where I think people get attached emotionally to the way things have been.
The Democratic governor of Colorado, Jared Polis, backed Trump on X. As well as saving taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, there are major environmental benefits to eliminating the penny. This is a great move.
The U.S. Mint, in its 2024 annual report, said it lost $85.3 million on the production of nearly 3.2 billion pennies.
Americans for Common Sense, and that's sense with a T, which represents the interests of zinc producers and coin manufacturers, I didn't know such a body existed, said in a statement in late January, the logical and fiscally responsible solution isn't to eliminate the penny, but to re-examine how the mint allocates its overhead costs and focus on reducing the cost of producing nickels.
I disagree with that. It would require an act of Congress to fully discontinue the coin as Congress oversees the manufacturing of coin currency.
Exemption talk about widespread fraud and abuse.
Oh, yeah. Tremendous fraud. There's tremendous fraud. And it's hard to believe that you can have that kind of fraud. You're talking about are you talking about what? Wait. Which are you talking? You're talking about with regard to all of the investigations that are going on about this stupidity. What we're going to do is tomorrow I'm having a news conference. I'm going to read to you some of the names that hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars have been given to. And if you tell me that we should be giving money to those things, those entities, I think you'll probably have to leave as a reporter because you're not very talented. When you look at the kind of money, billions and billions of dollars being thrown away illegally, and there's no chance. I mean, I say it in front of our Attorney General, there's no chance that there's not kickbacks or something going on. When you give millions and millions of dollars to somebody that stands to look at something for 15 minutes and walks away with millions of dollars, that money's coming back in some form. And that's only one form of corruption. The biggest thing is what they do to our country. They're taking massive amounts of money and spending it on items. I went through a list of 200 expenditures that were made, and I found 3 that looked like they were reasonable. Okay, 3. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow. We have a lot of stuff. And I want to commend Elon because he's done he doesn't need this. You know, he's abused by you people every day. He's found more things than anybody could find. I think he's got the credibility to do it. I know he does. And it's his group of people. You know, they started off with 12. I call them 12 geniuses. They started off with 12, and they went to 20 and 25, and now they're up to almost 100. People are joining to help them because there's a massive fraud that's taken place. There is truly a special bond between the United States and India, and the world's oldest democracy and the world's largest democracy. And I believe the world's largest country in terms of the numbers of people. And today, the Prime Minister and I are announcing a framework to strengthen those ties even further economically, and the U.S.-India Compact for the 21st century is a historic initiative that will deepen every aspect of our partnership and our friendship. Starting this year, we'll be increasing military sales to India by many billions of dollars. We're also paving the way to ultimately provide India with the F-35 stealth fighters. In 2017, my administration revived and reinvigorated the Quad security partnership. In our meeting today, the Prime Minister and I reaffirmed that strong cooperation among the United States, India, Australia, and Japan. And it's crucial, really, to maintaining peace and prosperity, tranquility, even in the Indo-Pacific. In addition, the United States and India will be working together like never before to confront the threat of radical Islamic terrorism, a threat all over the world, actually. Today, I'm pleased to announce that my administration has approved the extradition of one of the plotters and one of the very evil people of the world, and having to do with the horrific 2008 Mumbai terrorist attack, to face justice in India. So he's going to be going back to India to face justice. As we deepen our defense partnership, we'll also strengthen our economic ties and bring greater fairness and reciprocity to our trading relationship. As a signal of good faith, Prime Minister Modi recently announced the reductions to India's unfair, very strong tariffs that limit U.S. access into the Indian market very strongly, and really it's a big problem, I must say. India imposes a 30 to 40 to 60 and even 70% tariff on so many of the goods, and in some cases far more than that. And As an example, a 70% tariff on U.S. cars going into India, which makes it pretty much impossible to sell those cars. Today, the U.S. Trade deficit with India is almost $100 billion. And Prime Minister Modi and I have agreed that we'll begin negotiations to address the long-running disparities that should have been taken care of over the last 4 years, but they didn't do that. In the U.S.-India trading relationship, with the goal of signing an agreement, and we want a certain level playing field, which we really think we're entitled to, and he does also, in fairness. So we're going to work on that very hard, and we can make up the difference very easily with the deficit, with the sale of oil and gas, LNG, of which we have more than anybody in the world. The Prime Minister and I also reached an important agreement on energy that will restore the United States as a leading supplier of oil and gas to India. It will be hopefully their #1 supplier. And the groundbreaking development for U.S. nuclear industry. India is also reforming its laws to welcome U.S. nuclear technology, which is at the highest level, into the Indian market. This will bring safe, clean, and affordable electricity to millions of Indians and tens of billions of dollars to the U.S. civilian nuclear industry in India. And under the framework we are announcing today, the United States and India are also joining forces to ensure that artificial intelligence and other advanced technologies are developed by two of the most advanced nations, intellectually and otherwise technologically. Anywhere in the world, there's nobody very much closer. We have an incredible relationship there, and this is where it seems to be heading. And artificial intelligence, a very complex subject, but it seems to be where people want to be and they want to go, and we're leading right now by a lot, but other people will try to catch us. I don't know if they're going to be able to. We're going to make it available. We're going to make tremendous amounts of electricity available. We're going to let the people that are buying the electricity make their own electric plants, electric generation plants. And we've never done this in our country, but we're going to get it done very quickly. Lee Zeldin and his group are going to get the approvals in very rapid form. And we're calling it a national emergency, and that's exactly what it is. So we're going to remain at the top of the AI, or artificial intelligence, I think, for a long time to come. And we're going to be working very closely with India and other countries on that. But right now, we're the leader by quite a bit. Finally, we agreed to work together to help build one of the greatest trade routes in all of history. It will run from India to Israel to Italy and onward to the United States, connecting our partners by ports, railways, and undersea cables, many, many undersea cables. It's a big development. It's a lot of money going to be spent, and we've already spent some, but we're going to be spending a lot more in order to stay advanced.
Yeas are 52, nays are 48. Nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the motion to reconsider is considered, made, and laid upon the table, and the President will immediately notify of the Senate's actions.
Tulsi Gabbard has officially been confirmed as the next Director of National Intelligence for this Trump administration by a 52-48 vote. Jose, Republican majority here backing her confirmation and ultimately putting her atop the U.S. intelligence agencies. Mitch McConnell, ultimately the only Republican to vote against her nomination. This is the second nominee of Donald Trump's in which Mitch McConnell has voted no, but notably Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, who were skeptical of her nomination, ultimately voted to confirm her.
We're delighted to swear in our next Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
Please place your left hand on the Constitution and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear.
I, Tulsi Gabbard, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
And that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
And that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Senators have voted to confirm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the nation's new Health and Human Services Secretary. He's expected to be sworn in this afternoon. Let's bring in Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill and senior national policy reporter Ann Flaherty for more on that. Jay, what are you hearing from lawmakers about RFK Jr.?
Well, they want him to stick true to the promises that he made, some of those Republican holdout votes, because RFK Jr. went from being one of Donald Trump's most controversial cabinet picks to having a relatively easy confirmation vote on the Senate floor. And it's because some of those moderate Republicans like Susan Collins of Maine or Lisa Murkowski of Alaska said that he made assurances to them that he wouldn't change the way that the U.S. government approves vaccines. He wouldn't change vaccine information on the CDC website or other government health websites. And so one of the things some of those Republicans have said is now they're going to be watching him closely because that was enough to earn their vote. And also, of course, they didn't want to be a thorn in the side of this administration. But now they want to see if RFK Jr. lives up to those promises he made in order to secure this job. One Republican who those assurances was not enough for was Mitch McConnell, the former top Republican in the Senate. This is the third time McConnell has voted against one of Donald Trump's cabinet picks. And here's a little bit of what he wrote, given his reasoning why he voted no on RFK Jr. Again, the only Republican to do so. He said, quote, "Individuals, parents, and families have a right to push for a healthier nation and demand the best possible scientific guidance on preventing and treating illnesses. But a record of trafficking in dangerous conspiracy theories and eroding trust in public health institutions does not entitle Mr. Kennedy to lead those important efforts." So tough words there from Mitch McConnell. But again, Diane, the only Republican no vote, Kennedy having a relatively easy path to confirmation today.
We're going to make this a good one, right? Okay, it's good so far. Good. It's a 10.
Right, go in there. Get the kids in there. Go in there. Pick the kids in.
Over here, please.
All right.
Really happy.
Would all the family like to join?
Yeah, sure. All right.
Please place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. I, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
let me just go off of what Tom was just reporting there and start off with FBI Director nominee Kash Patel. He's now facing allegations that he's overseeing firings in the Bureau before he's even confirmed. Let's first listen to some of the claims coming from Senator Dick Durbin on this.
Multiple whistleblowers have disclosed to my staff highly credible information indicating that Mr. Kash Patel has been personally directing the ongoing purge of senior law enforcement officials at the FBI. Let me remind you, Mr. President, Mr. Patel at this moment in time is not on any public payroll, nor does he have any authority by our government.
Yeah, Senator, you're on the Senate Judiciary Committee. I mean, what do you make of these allegations?
This is another attempt by the left to stop Kash Patel from being confirmed. But you know what? He is going to be voted out of committee today. We're looking forward to doing that. He is going to be confirmed later today. We're also going to confirm Robert F. Kennedy. President Donald Trump brought forward qualified people, really kind of outside of the box, which is a good thing for helping to reshape the federal government. And Marky, this is what the American people voted for. This is what they want to see happen, is to drain the swamp, to make certain that taxpayer money is not being wasted, to end 2 tiers of treatment, 2 tiers of access, 2 tiers of justice. They are tired of it. They want it stopped. It is a new day in Washington, D.C., and President Trump's cabinet is going to carry out what the American people want to see happen.
On the favorably reporting the nomination of Kash Patel to be Director of Federal Bureau of Investigation, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Graham.
Aye.
Mr. Gordon.
Aye. Priceless. We used to be in it then. Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. Hawley.
Aye.
Mr. Tillis.
Aye.
Mr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Mrs. Blackburn. Aye. Mr. Schmidt.
Aye.
Mrs. Britt. Aye. Mrs. Moody. Aye. Mr. Durbin.
No.
Mr. Whitehouse.
No.
Ms. Klobuchar.
No.
Mr. Cruz.
He wants no by proxy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Blumenthal.
No.
I guess until the...
Ms. Serrano. No. Mr. Booker.
No.
Mr. Padilla.
No.
Mr. Welch.
No.
Mr. Schiff.
No.
Chairman Grassley.
Aye.
On this vote, the ayes are 12, the nays are 10.
The vote of 12 to 10, the nomination will be favorably reported to the floor.
We're going to be signing a very important deal today. It's Doge, and I'm going to ask Elon to tell you a little bit about it and some of the things that we found, which are shocking. Billions and billions of dollars in waste, fraud, and abuse. And I think it's very important. And that's one of the reasons I got elected. I said, we're going to do that. Nobody had any idea it was that bad, that sick, and that corrupt. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So we've got a $2 trillion deficit, and if we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense. But and if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country. So what I really want to say is, like, it's not optional for us to reduce the federal expenses. It's essential. It's essential for America to remain solvent as a country, and it's essential for America to have the resources necessary to provide things to its citizens and not simply be servicing vast amounts of debt.
And also, could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about 30 million,
right,
etc.?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, you know, what happened to USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. Maybe they're very good at investing, in which case we should take their investment advice, perhaps. But just there seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it. So, you know, we're looking at, say, well, we just if you look at say Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just a massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks. You've got comment fields that are also blank, so you don't know why the payment was made. And then we've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And this, we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation, can take up to a year to get on the list, and even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing. So what we're talking about here, we're really just talking about adding common sense controls that should be present, that haven't been present. So you say, like, well, how could such a thing arise? That seems crazy. When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense. Oh, that's why everything they approve all the payments at Treasury. Because if you approve all the payments, you don't get complaints. But now we're saying that, no, actually, we are going to complain. If money is spent badly, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible and frugal manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people. I mean, these things, like, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical, I think. It's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it. So, you know, there's crazy things like just cursory examination of Social Security, and we've got people in there that are 150 years old. Now, do you know anyone who's 150? I don't. Okay. They should be on the Guinness Book of World Records. They're missing out. So, you know, that's a case where, like, I think they're probably dead. It's my guess. Or they should be very famous, one of the two. And then there's a whole bunch of Social Security payments where there's no identifying information. Well, like, why is there no identifying information? Obviously, we want to make sure that people who deserve to receive Social Security do receive it, and that they receive it quickly and accurately. I'll tell you another crazy thing. So, you know, one of the things is, like, we are trying to sort of right-size the federal bureaucracy, just make sure that this. Obviously, there need to be a lot of people working for the federal government, but not as many as currently. So we're saying, well, okay, let's, if people can retire, you know, with full benefits and everything, that would be good. They can retire, get their retirement payments, everything. And then we were told, this is actually, I think, a great anecdote, because we were told the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And I'm like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down and then, sometimes, and then nobody can retire. Doesn't that sound crazy? There's like 1,000 people that work on this. So I think if we can take those people and say, like, you know what, instead of working in a mine shaft and carrying manila envelopes to, boxes in a mine shaft, you could do practically anything else. And you would add to the goods and services of the United States in a more useful way.
USAID has found giving money, sending money to terrorist groups. Okay, we know that. It was uncovered in the Elon Musk audit. Now, who the heck is going to defend that? I don't know. I want to move on to other stuff, but Democrats are essentially defending it. They don't want USAID to be dismantled. They don't want it to be reduced in force. They're defending it. How can you defend that?
They lie about it and pretend that it's about feeding starving children in Biafra or something.
Oh my God, starving children in Biafra.
And they also resist the intelligence that has been out there for quite some time, pointing out that we've been funding the Taliban for years, right? To millions and millions per week, and continued even after we paused USAID or foreign spending. We are still funding $43 million per week to the Taliban. So they are the closed eyes and ears there go far beyond simply dollar for dollar.
Hello, everybody. Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to News Nation. Here we look left and right, and then we aim for reasonable. So let's get after it. And what a moment we had today. I have never seen anything like it. That presser was one of the most informative of the Trump era. And no small irony, it wasn't him doing most of the talking. But we learned more about what the administration is doing and how it responds to legitimate, and yes, some illegitimate, scrutiny. Elon Musk, center stage, very different than the head troll on his social media trash site. He had his son playing along on his shoulders, and it was reminiscent of the JFK days with John, if only because of that. But there was also this spirit trying to be inculcated of, let's do things different. Let's try to be a new generation here. Of course, Trump is part of the older generation, but Musk is not. And he held forth on how he is trying to change the way government does business. Take a listen.
The people voted for major government reform. There should be no doubt about that. That was on the campaign. The president spoke about that at every rally. What are the two ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1 trillion? And it's really two things: competence and caring with deregulation, because there's a lot of sort of regulations that don't ultimately serve the public good. We need to free the builders of America to build. Because if you can get $1 trillion of economic growth and you can cut the budget deficit by $1 trillion, between now and next year, there is no inflation.
I've never heard so much said, and yet the president is just sitting there listening. It is completely unorthodox. But does that mean it's bad? No. I know the game is about reflexively attacking the side that you hate or anything that is different, but let's be honest. Does anyone think a majority of this country does not want government waste eliminated?
Flashback. This is actually, I think, a great anecdote because we're told the most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. Then the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government. And the elevator breaks down and sometimes, and then nobody can retire. Doesn't that sound crazy? There's like 1,000 people that work on this. So I think if we can take those people and say, like, you know what, instead of working in a mine shaft and carrying manila envelopes to, boxes in a mine shaft, you could do practically anything else. And you would add to the goods and services of the United States in a more useful way.
End of flashback.
Everybody listening was probably thinking, huh? but that limestone mine is real. Washington Post reporter David Fairholt wrote a piece about it in 2014 titled "A Sinkhole of Federal Bureaucracy in Pennsylvania." Fairholt wrote, during the past 30 years, administrations have spent more than $100 million trying to automate the old-fashioned process in the mine and make it run at the speed of computers. They couldn't. So now the mine continues to run at the speed of human fingers and feet. That failure imposes costs on federal retirees who have to wait months for their full benefit checks. And it has imposed costs on the taxpayer. The Obama administration has now made the mine run faster, but mainly by paying for more fingers and for more feet.
Here's what Morning Joe Scarborough had to say about Musk's initiatives this morning.
This is, I think, a concept that many Americans would support, a lot of independents would support. The question, though, is it being done legally? Is it being done constitutionally? And is it being done transparently? I think Elon Musk getting before reporters, I actually think as much as possible, since his people are running through these government agencies, I think that is extraordinarily important. And it's also, of course, most important that the letter of the law is followed, that the Constitution's followed, that actually Congress cares about its Article 1 powers.
I think we're going to argue about this one. Now, fresh off targeting USAID, an agency that spends billions of dollars overseas in the form of foreign aid, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is next expected to gut the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. I say good riddance. The CFPB is a business-killing monstrosity that makes services more expensive for consumers and is, quite by design, unaccountable to Congress. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tweeted, by freezing the CFPB, the Trump administration is dismantling critical consumer protections that return billions of dollars to taxpayers. Let's be clear, Republicans are enabling financial predators to rip off hardworking Americans to reward their billionaire donors, end quote. Now, people who don't know very much about the agency might be tempted to agree with Pelosi. After all, consumer protection, that sounds like a worthwhile goal, right? But it's important to take a closer look at what CFPB actually accomplishes. The organization was originally the brainchild of Elizabeth Warren and came into existence in 2010 in response to the financial crisis. Importantly, the agency was structured as an independent bureau of the Federal Reserve. In my radar yesterday, I explained why many libertarians like myself are distrustful of the Fed, which operates outside congressional overview and has tremendous power to affect the money supply. Well, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is just as sheltered from congressional oversight and then some. As a result, the CFPB often makes rules for businesses and financial institutions that were never approved or recommended by legislators. For instance, during the last few days of the Biden administration, the CFPB issued a rule that prevents credit reports from considering medical debt when they issue a credit score. Look, I'm sympathetic to people who owe medical debt, and I advocate reforming the healthcare system. But isn't it kind of crazy for the government to tell a private credit score issuing organization that they are not allowed to consider whether an individual owes significant medical debt when calculating their credit? Isn't that kind of like telling, a property manager that they aren't allowed to ask prospective renters whether they make enough money to pay the rent? Now, keep in mind, this prohibition on including medical debt was never debated, discussed, or voted on by anyone in the legislature. It's simply something the CFPB decided on, but it has the force of law. It lacks democratic accountability. You can't vote for or against the politicians who implemented it. It's exactly the kind of thing that Trump and Musk and Doge are working against. As George Mason University economist Veronique DeRougy, friend of mine, explained in a recent article arguing for the organization's entire abolition, it uses rules on home mortgages. The rules on home mortgages that the CFPB implemented end up making it harder to qualify for loans if you are self-employed or have a non-traditional source of income, ultimately pushing these borrowers toward non-qualified mortgage loans and higher rates. DeRougy writes that the agency's crackdown on credit card fees led to higher interest rates and fewer card options for lower income consumers. And in the payday lending industry, the CFPB's meddling has pushed vulnerable consumers toward predatory alternatives, end quote. That's by design. The philosophy of the CFPB is that people are too stupid to know what kinds of financial arrangements work best for them. In practice, it makes it more difficult for low-income people to get loans, to to qualify for credit cards, to buy houses, because the CFPB is imposing costs and restrictions on financial institutions that make it prohibitively difficult for those businesses to provide their services to low-income people. Now, there are costs to all these regulations, by the way, costs that businesses always and everywhere pass on to you and me, the consumer. In the name of protecting consumers, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is actually making their lives much, much more difficult. If financial institutions are engaged in outright fraud or deception, that's illegal, and there's already a regulatory agency to police them, like the Federal Trade Commission. The CFPB, on the other hand, just makes financial transactions and services more expensive and less available to low-income people. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are putting consumer welfare first if and when they decide to kill it.
JJ. On Doge and the fraud claims, Elon Musk in the Oval yesterday gave us some information on that. We're just wondering if there's some proof, evidence. Is the White House willing to share evidence of those fraud claims, or can Elon Musk come to the briefing room and share material evidence of what he's talking about?
Sure, I would love for Elon Musk to come to the briefing room. That's why we had him go to the Oval Office yesterday, where I think he provided great answers. He was speaking in layman's terms, speaking common sense to all of you in the media, but also to Americans at home. But I would say especially to all of you in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to Doge. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly transparent on what Doge is doing. There is an X account with the Doge handle. They are tweeting out what they are doing on a daily basis. They have a website where they are posting the receipts of the contracts that they are reviewing and the payments that they have stopped from going out the door. The secretaries of our departments have stopped from going out the door. And I would also say that before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them, and I actually brought some today because all of you know I love to bring the receipts. We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent, and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that Doge found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that Doge identified. I can continue to go through these. Oh, I love this one. $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka. What is this doing to continue the interests of the American people? Absolutely nothing. These are the line items across the federal government that Doge is identifying daily. They're moving very fast. There's a lot of paper that we can show you, but we're happy to do it. This administration has been more than transparent about what Doge is doing. And here's one of their tweets that they posted about the mine. I believe this is in Pennsylvania, where the federal employee retirement system is being processed. Did anybody know this was even happening in our country before Elon Musk talked about it in the Oval Office yesterday? A lot of Americans didn't. So we are providing transparency and accessibility on a daily basis when it comes to Doge. And I also have a Doge daily report, if anybody would like it, on all of the things that they are identifying and finding. We're happy to provide this information to you. We're talking about it every single day.
The government agencies coordinating aid efforts should be eager to share the details about how their use of taxpayer money makes the world a better place. Yet the hard truth is, as we have seen, USAID has been out of control for decades. There's no shortage of questionable USAID projects. For example, a $20 million grant to the Sesame Workshop nonprofit to create an Iraqi version of Sesame Street. More than $9 million intended for civilian food and medical supplies in Syria ended up in the hands of violent terrorists. And another one, $27 million, was designated to so-called reintegration gift bags, which may even include a Barbie doll for deported Central Americans. There was also $68,000 awarded for dance classes in none other than Wuhan, China. And after being stonewalled by USAID for years, I learned funds meant for economic relief in Ukraine were instead paying for Ukrainian models and designers to attend fashion weeks in New York City, London, and Paris. And Mr. Chair, I ask unanimous consent to enter my oversight letters and USAID's responses into the record. Thank you, Mr. Chair. USAID is notorious for exploiting legal loopholes, as my COVID-19 origins investigations exposed. By law, all federal spending is required to be publicly available on usaspending.gov. We've known for a while that Dr. Fauci used NIH funding to finance bat coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but it took the watchdog White Coat Waste Project to expose evidence that USAID was funding it too. In fact, the bulk of the money came from USAID. Yet no grants to the Chinese lab appeared on usaspending.gov. It was hidden from the public through layers of unreported subgrants and subawards. Thankfully, my push to defund EcoHealth Alliance was successful, and the group is now barred from receiving U.S. government grants. But this is why my TRACS Act must become law to prevent money being sent to China, the Taliban, or any other foreign adversary. Every grant recipient must be disclosed to ensure accountability, and we shouldn't stop there. My bipartisan Stop Secret Spending Act, introduced with Ranking Member Peters, would add additional transparency to federal spending. So, Mr. Schellenberger, I'll start with you, please. Why is USAID so secretive about how it spends billions of taxpayer dollars? Is it to avoid the public outrage over the waste, or is there something more nefarious there?
Well, thank you, Senator. And first of all, thank you for your leadership in bringing transparency and accountability to aid and the funding there. Obviously, this example you just gave of the Wuhan Institute of Virology is incredible. I mean, the fact it appears that the U.S. government funded the creation of the virus that caused the global pandemic. Mm-hmm. We also know that President Barack Obama had banned that research, and that Anthony Fauci had created a workaround to get around that and move that research to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Had there been some transparency about it, I think some questions would have been raised. One of the claims, of course, that was made right after Senator Cotton raised the idea that maybe it did leak from a lab. Washington Post claimed it was a debunked conspiracy theory. Anybody who had just Googled virus lab leak would have discovered that there had been years and years, maybe decades, of news stories about viruses leaking from labs. It's a very common thing, and of course, it was one of the main reasons that we wanted to end that risky gain-of-function research, because we knew it was the high risk of something leaking from a lab. So I think I applaud your work. We need much more transparency with it. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned before, I do think that some part of that motivation may have been to hide regime change operations that were run by USAID in concert with the State Department. If you're going to be doing regime change operations, those belong in the State Department and with the CIA, mm-hmm. Not in a charitable organization, because if you genuinely want people to trust in vaccines or other public health measures, it's a terrible thing for them to believe that maybe it's part of some counterterrorism operation or some manipulation by the U.S. government that has some political motivation or some regime change motivation. If it's truly, truly charitable support for things like, for good causes, then there has to be a firewall between that and what the CIA and the State Department are doing.
Joining us with more, Counselor to the President, Alina Habba. Let's start with those two. Well, good to have you, by the way. Let's start with those last two items. It's interesting because the president gets elected to do a job. I think there are 40 lawsuits in total out there against Donald Trump and the administration so far. But I believe the courts, as part of the executive branch, he has the authority to do everything he's doing. Your reaction to the first two court decisions?
Well, first of all, absolutely, he has the authority to do what he's doing. As we've seen yesterday, we had momentum where we were giving people money to walk away if you don't want to come to work. Imagine that. And we'll pay you till October. Imagine that, but they tried to stop it. Sean, we know what's going on here. It's very simple. It's the same thing that's been happening for the last 3.5 years. They're panicking, and the only thing they do is go to radical left judges that want to make a name for themselves to stop the executive branch for doing exactly what was mandated to do on November 5th when we swept the nation. It's absolutely ridiculous. And frankly, this is all over everything. I was discussing this actually with Elon, and I said, for all the money you've saved this country, perhaps we should also have a ticker for every case that they're going to bring. It's going to go up while this one goes down, because that's what they do. If we want to save money, people are going to get upset. Why are they getting upset? Because we're taking money out of their pockets. The best thing that Elon Musk is going to do is going to look at people's salaries and say, okay, if you make X amount of money and you're worth $68 million, we're going to look at why that is. And that's really the bottom line, because we could talk about everything, every executive order, but there is a panic in D.C. at this moment where I now live, and it is very simple. We are cutting them off from their funding. And that means politicians, not just saving taxpayer dollars. And that's where the panic is coming from.
I just want to speak frankly at first to the American people. We're nearing $37 trillion in national debt. What does that mean? That means that each and every U.S. taxpayer owes over $323,000. Okay? What does that mean? That means when the EPIC, which is the Economic Policy Innovation Center, says we have 18 trillion left. That's it. 18 trillion left to take out. And we're spending $2 trillion in debt every year. Folks, we're at the precipice of a debt, like a debt cycle. We are literally at a point in which the dollar will be worth nothing. What does that mean? And we know Social Security goes bankrupt in 8 years, right? Medicare goes bankrupt in 10 years. And then 15 years from now, the dollar is completely devalued and worth nothing. So what does that mean? That means your pension, the money in your bank, your savings is nothing. It's worthless. So what are we doing? We're trying to save this country. We're trying to save your pensions. We're trying to save your bank accounts. We're trying to save this country for the next generation. And it would be nice if we had help. But instead, we have people that are fighting us on this. And I think that I would hate to be in the Democratic Party right now, because you're in a really bad bind. You're having to defend all of this crazy spending, all of this crazy waste. So how do you do it? You do ad hominem attacks. You attack the messenger. Oh, Elon Musk, right? He's rich. He must be evil, right? That's the attacks. Really? You can't do any better than that, right? Let's talk on the policy. Help us. We're trying to save this country. This is and Elon Musk, who's making no money doing this, is trying to save this country. Why? Because he is invested in the United States of America more than anybody, right? So I think that we should embrace it. In fact, not a single company, governor of any state would ever turn down Elon Musk and his team of Doge from coming in and providing free services to right the course and financially in any state or organization. It's ridiculous that we would demonize someone that loves this country so much. Mr. Whitman, the formation of agencies via the executive action is not new, right? The formation of Doge is not new. Can you are you familiar with any other previous presidencies where they've formed organizations like Doge via executive action?
Yeah, so actually the agency that Doge is occupying is one that was created in a previous administration. So it is something that happens routinely. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, there's been the Office of Budget Management was created, Environmental Protection Agency was created, the U.S. Digital Service, which is now Doge, was created all by executive order, right?
And actually one other I'd add is USAID was originally created through an executive order by President Kennedy and then later formalized.
And then, Madam Chair, I have a video I would like to end with that just... Let's review, if we could cue that, and I want to remind my Democratic friends, at a point in which you once had the majority of the American people on your side, this is what your party believed in.
This report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I've read it, and where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely appropriate for our governments and our agencies to try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress and legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign to cut waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not acting. There you go.
Subcommittee Chairwoman Marjorie Taylor Greene vowing to fight the war on waste. What did you take away from the Doge Oversight Subcommittee meeting this past week?
Well, I thought it was very informative. We had the Democrats, of course, spent all their time attacking President Trump and Elon Musk, and the Republicans, I felt like we asked legitimate questions about the waste, abuse, and overspending of our government. $36 trillion in debt. You can't get past that. And, we're getting a lot of complaints from federal employees that are saying that they have to show back up for work, that they still haven't been going back since COVID, things like that. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and I think the name calling and everything else will continue, because that's the Democrats are chasing their tail right now. This Doge thing, it's uncovering a whole lot more than that. It's billions and billions of dollars that we're sending to terrorist organizations, and you got to wonder some of this money if it's not flowing right back into the back pockets of some politicians in Washington. And I think that's why the number one search this week on the Washington area computers was criminal defense attorneys.
Tell me more about something you just mentioned. Which terrorist organizations and what monies have we been sending to them?
Well, actually, I have a bill to stop it. The Taliban gets $40 million a week that we know of through aid. And Congressman Perry actually brought forth some more, where we think it's in the billions of dollars to some of these terrorist organizations. And it's and the money's not really being laundered that well. The bills that I have deal with, we're sending money, so-called aid, but as you know, money is very fungible. It flows into their bank accounts, and then they are forced to turn over a cut off the top. The Lord just takes 10% out of the top with tithe. Mob takes a good chunk when they do it, but the Taliban, they just get theirs right off the top, right out of the bank. So, and we couldn't even get Chuck Schumer and the Democrats last go around when he was in charge. We couldn't even get them to bring the bill up. It passed unanimous in the House. So there's a podcaster named Sean Ryan out of Nashville area. He's a former Navy SEAL, CIA operative, and he brought that to my attention through another fella named who's goes by the name of Legend. He can't go have his full name because of obviously Taliban would like to kill him. And as my conversation last week with former president over there told me that there's over 100 Taliban members in our country right now that have come in illegally. So we've got to really be careful.
The Department of Homeland Security firing 4 FEMA employees after it was revealed they authorized $59 million in payments for luxury hotels in New York City to house migrants. The firings include FEMA's chief financial officer, 2 program analysts, and a grant specialist. The payments reportedly violating President Trump's executive order prioritizing disaster relief funds for Americans. It also comes as President Trump calls for FEMA to be terminated. Let's go to Tom Dempsey in Washington with more on this. This just happening, these firings. What more can you share?
Hey, Marty. Yeah, just in the last hour, News Nation confirmed the Department of Homeland Security fired 4 employees, including the chief financial officer of FEMA for payments made to New York luxury hotels that housed migrants. We want to show you some of the statement that was obtained by News Nation. This is from the Department of Homeland Security, and it says in part, quote, effective immediately, FEMA is terminating the employment of 4 individuals for circumventing leadership to unilaterally make egregious payments for luxury New York City hotels for migrants, and adding, quote, DHS will not sit idly and allow deep state activists to undermine the will and safety of the American people. This comes as President Donald Trump has really been critical of FEMA, even calling out the agency and saying it should be terminated. In a post to Truth Social in just the last hour, in fact, the president wrote, quote, the Biden-run FEMA has been a disaster. FEMA should be terminated. It has been slow and totally ineffective. Individual states should handle storms as they come. Big savings, far more efficient. Aside from FEMA's chief financial officer, the DHS firings, though, include 2 program analysts as well as a grant specialist. So a little bit of a shakeup regarding all this, Marnie.
We're here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMV. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and angel moms, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today. As you know, we sued Illinois, and New York didn't listen. So now you're next. Millions of illegal aliens with violent records have flooded into our communities, bringing violence and deadly drugs with them. With me today, I'm so proud to be joined by Tammy Nobles. Tammy is an angel mom. Her beautiful daughter, Kayla Hamilton, was murdered by an MS-13 member in 2022. Kayla had just turned 20 years old, and she was raped and murdered by someone who should not have been in our country. Yet, he was released, flown to Maryland, where he committed this violent murder. I just want you to hear from Tammy. Tammy represents not only herself and her family, but all of the great angel moms around this country who have suffered because of what the Biden administration did, and it is over.
Thank you for having me here today and being able to share Kayla's story. Her murderer was able to come across the border knowing that he was flagged as an MS-13 gang member, and he had a criminal record in 2020 in El Salvador for illicit gang activity. He came over as an unoccupied alien child, saying that he was afraid of gang activity in his country. Health and Human Services called him a nice boy, and he showed age-appropriate behavior. That fell so wrong when he murdered my daughter. He ended up in Maryland, where he was able to rent a room in the same mobile home as her. We thought it was a legit company that were renting out these rooms, but it turned out that it was another illegal immigrant who owned these mobile homes, and he knew Walter from El Salvador. He knew him and allowed him to rent a room with my child. Kayla just turned 20 years old 3 days before she was murdered. Her murderer was only living there for 5 days before he viciously strangled her, raped her, and left her on the floor like trash and robbed her of $6. I have been sharing her story for over 2.5 years to bring change, because this should not have ever happened to Kayla, and it shouldn't be happening to other families being hurt by the border. Homeland Security did not do their jobs. They did not check his background. You know, they did say that he was processed. So if they processed him, they knew that he was a gang member and still allowed him here. Health and Human Services did not verify the sponsor and allow him to go with a sponsor that they don't even know if it was his cousin or his aunt. And he was able to leave the sponsor's house to go live wherever he wanted. And I am going to continue sharing Kayla's story to help save others and to bring awareness of what was happening under the Biden-Harris administration. And I'm so thankful for Pam having me here today. And I'm so thankful for the opportunities I got from Trump and any other platform, you know, people who allowed me to share her story, because this is going to end. No other parent should suffer by having their child murdered by somebody that shouldn't be here. And I'm gonna continue, you know, sharing it, and for Kayla, you know, and also for others. Thank you.
And it's my understanding that he also admitted to other murders, correct? Multiple murders.
He wrote a letter, and it was intercepted in jail, that he committed 4 murders and 2 rapes.
And that's who we were letting walk into our country. And that's why President Trump has directed this to stop. And if you don't comply with federal law, we will hold you accountable. We did it to Illinois, strike 1. Strike 2 is New York. And if you are a state not complying with federal law, you're next, get ready. And the great men and women of law enforcement are standing behind me today. We have FBI, DEA, ATF agents. They put their lives on the line every single day to protect us. And what New York has, they have green light laws, meaning they're giving a green light to any illegal alien in New York, where law enforcement officers cannot check their identity if they pull them over. Law enforcement officers do not have access to their background. And if these great men and women pull over someone and don't have access to their background, they have no idea who they're dealing with. And it puts their lives on the line every single day. Violent criminals, gang members, drug traffickers, human smugglers will no longer terrorize the American people. And that is why we are here today.
It's hard to believe there are any jurisdictions out there that wouldn't cooperate with ICE when it comes to illegal aliens charged with forcibly raping children. But in Massachusetts, it's just routine. Take a look at this case. ICE Boston just announcing they arrested this Guatemalan illegal alien charged in Massachusetts with 3 counts of aggravated child rape and 3 counts of forcible rape of a child. So the question is, why was he on the streets, right? Well, ICE says their detainer request on him was ignored by the Essex County Superior Court due to sanctuary policy. The locals released him into the community on bail without any notice to ICE. In a statement, the director of ICE Boston says in part, quote, Jose Fernando Perez has been charged with some horrific crimes against a minor in our Commonwealth. He is exactly the type of alien we are targeting with our worst first policy. He posed a significant danger to the children of Massachusetts, and we will not tolerate such a threat to our community. ICE Boston also announcing the arrest of this Turkish illegal alien charged in Massachusetts with assault and battery against an intellectually disabled person and witness intimidation. But ICE says their detainer on him was also ignored by the sanctuary city of Somerville. He had also been released into the public. Elsewhere around the U.S., ICE Seattle arrested this Salvadoran illegal alien wanted in his home country for aggravated homicide. Here in Los Angeles, ICE arrested this Guatemalan illegal alien charged with sexual assault and rape with a gun. And in Colorado, the DEA announced their top 10 arrests of illegal immigrants in recent days, including several affiliated with Tren de Aragua and others with egregious crimes like kidnapping, child sexual assault, and fentanyl trafficking. And Dana, I was talking to a law enforcement source in Massachusetts about the child rape case that I referenced, and I asked, there's got to be some sort of a catch here, right? Forget about cooperating with ICE. How does somebody charged with so many counts of aggravated, forcible child rape even get released on bail in the first place? The response I got was, quote, welcome to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Earlier today, a press conference was held talking about a new piece of legislation being proposed in the Arizona state legislature. It would aim to give law enforcement officers in the state more powers to deal with drones at the southern border. Now, if passed, the bill would give officers immunity from liability for damages caused by the interception of a drone under certain circumstances. So, Arizona law enforcement are hoping to ramp up the fight against drug cartels. Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays was also on hand for this. She tweeted, "Proud to stand with Representative David Marshall in support of House Bill 2733, which will give Arizona sheriffs and local law enforcement the authority to disable drones used by drug cartels to smuggle dangerous drugs across our border." So, what we want to do right now is let you listen in to a little bit of this press conference from earlier today in Phoenix. Let's watch.
House Bill 2733, which will give law enforcement a critical tool that will help combat cartels and secure our southern border. You know that we've had issue with our border for quite a few years. And right now we have the opportunity with the assistance of the Attorney General to secure our borders. And I want to thank my fellow legislators behind me, law enforcement, the Attorney General's office as well, for their support and collaboration. Increasingly, cartels are using drones now, drones that bring across narcotics across our border, to drop them off. And many times, these drones will fly in within 30 miles of the border into the desert. House Bill 2733 will allow law enforcement to intercept and disable these cartel-operated drones along our southern border, stopping surveillance by using criminal organization as well as capturing dangerous drugs before they enter our border. This legislation will also provide the necessary legal protections for our officers who will bring down these drug smuggling drones. Cartel actions directly threaten the livelihood of all Arizonans. In 2024, Arizona saw 1,479 opioid deaths. That means 1,479 innocent lives were lost too soon, and their families were forever changed because of these deadly drugs crossing our borders. But when given the right tools, like with HB 2733, law enforcement will be able to capture these drugs before they cause any irreparable damage to our communities. According to DPS, in 2024, law enforcement seized 150 pounds of heroin, 890 pounds of cocaine, 4,190 pounds of meth, 7,039 pounds of marijuana, and 2,647 pounds of fentanyl. In January this year, DPS has already seized 7 pounds of heroin, 580 pounds of cocaine, and 1,760 pounds of methamphetamine, 937 pounds of marijuana, and 430 pounds of fentanyl. And by passing this critical legislation, what we do is we are empowering our law enforcement officers with the authority and legal backing to address this crisis. We're also sending a clear message to the cartels. Arizona will not tolerate cartels infringing upon our security and dispensing deadly drugs to our citizens. And it's about time that we as legislators step up and give our law enforcement the tools they need to combat this disease at the border, the disease of drug trafficking and human trafficking.
Hallelujah! Amen. God bless. Amen. Hallelujah.
All right, did you see this yesterday? Secretary of State Marco Rubio came to J.D. Vance's defense after a CBS host criticized his speech in Munich and made this comparison to Nazi Germany.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide.
Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime. The point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion in free speech and intolerance for opposing points of view within Europe, and that's of concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together.
Fox News contributor Joe Concha joins me now. Joe, what did you think about this exchange?
I don't know, Carly, thanks for having me, why any member of the Trump administration would appear on any CBS News program, and especially anything hosted by a Democratic activist like Margaret Brennan. That's one of life's great mysteries. So let's get this straight. Her argument is that the Holocaust happened because of too much free speech. It was weaponized to conduct a genocide. Rubio, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who is as serious as a prison fight and as sharp as anyone out there, period, was not having it. He also asked back, why would our allies or anyone be irritated by free speech? And to his point, the genocide was committed by an authoritarian Nazi regime. I mean, who knew that Face the Nation, once moderated by like actual journalists like Bob Schieffer, had morphed into The View? But that's where we're at this point. And Rubio handled it beautifully, and he's correct. And again, Margaret Brennan, who, remember, she co-moderated that vice presidential debate with J.D. Vance when she tried to fact-check Vance. Vance fact-checked her back, and then she cut off his mic. They're proving to be no different than MSNBC at this point. It's bizarre.
Is that it? No, there's more.
We want to get stuff done. We want to make life better for the American people. But I'm trying to figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? Republicans have repeatedly lectured America. They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
The fearless opposition party, ladies and gentlemen. Give them a round of applause. Give them a round of applause. There's nothing we can do. What do you want us to do? I'm gonna stand here as the House minority leader and complain about how we don't have any leverage when I could be messaging about how there's a robbery going on right now as we speak. The dismantling of the government agencies seeking to return money to Americans who are defrauded by the big banks. Can you maybe muster up enough energy to give a speech about that? House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. God, the Democrats are so pathetic. They're so pathetic because if you don't agree with what the Trump administration is up to, if you don't identify as a Republican, if you didn't want to vote for Donald Trump, what other option do you have? Okay, the party that tried to run a decomposing corpse, and then when he got caught, they anointed the Democratic nominee. The party that keeps telling you that there's nothing they can do, whether they're in power or out of power.
Yeah, I mean, look,
come on.
So, guys, you've literally heard me sometimes sing this line. There's nothing we could do. There's nothing we can do. That's the Democratic mantra. And that they say that when they get in power. They're like, oh, the filibuster, the parliamentarian, skittle-boo. You're like, that's not even a word. It doesn't matter. There's nothing we could do. There's nothing we could do.
They're so pathetic.
And now that they're in the minority, here comes Hakeem Jeffries to sing the same song. There's nothing we could do. Then what? You know what? The American people believed you. You kept telling them that you can't do anything, so they voted you out of power because you can't do anything. Why don't you man up and grow a spine and a brain and actually figure out a strategy? That moron just said, well, and the Republicans have the House and the Senate and the White House, and the Republicans message to the American people. Wait, why don't you message to the American people? You're doing a press conference right there, schmuck. Why don't you get out your message? I didn't think about that.
That boy is good. This is it. This is the opposition party. So look, his explanation for why Democrats can't deliver for Americans right now is that Republicans just never let them get anything done. Right? That's the role of your opposition party, Hakeem Jeffries. But isn't it amazing that when Republicans want something, they usually find a way to get what they want? Anyway, he doubled down later in the same press conference. Let's hear what the House Minority Leader has to say.
We've made clear from the beginning, there's a season to govern and a season to campaign. We are in the governing season. And so we're ready to work together on any issue. But I'm also confused about the leverage that we allegedly have in the face of such an overwhelming mandate that was given to Republicans by the American people.
You've
got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doing webinars to explain to illegal immigrants how to evade ICE arrests. And then she tweeted out after something you said maybe she's going to be in trouble now. And she says maybe he can learn to read the Constitution would be a good place to start. She's continuing her resist efforts against your efforts, Tom.
Look, I forgot more about the Constitution and immigration enforcement as you ever know. I mean, I had to educate her during congressional testimony that entering the country illegally is a crime. So, whatever. But what she needs to do is read the statutes enacted by Congress. Title 8, United States Code 1324, United States. Title 8, United States Code 1324 and 25. That's what she needs to read, because it's illegal to enter this country. It's a crime to enter this country illegally. Not only that, when you harbor and conceal and impede law enforcement, that's a felony. So what she's doing, she says she's educating them as to the constitutional rights, and we all know they got constitutional rights. But what she's really doing, you and I and the rest of the country knows, she's trying to teach them how to evade law enforcement. Now, I just said, well, out of the gate, we're concentrating on public safety threats, national security threats. So she's educating those in the country illegally with a significant criminal conviction, public safety threat. Don't open your door, don't dot the I's. Here's how you invade law enforcement. Let's hope she's not educating the next person who gets out and murders a young college student in Georgia. I mean, these are bad people we're looking for. So she can call it education all she wants, but we all know it's about evading law enforcement. These people have been ordered removed. The people we're looking for right now have final orders. They're criminals. They're in the country illegally. A judge has ordered them removed. They become a fugitive. And these are the folks she's helping? So I've asked the Department of Justice to look at this. Where is the line on impediment? Where does that fine line so we can instruct ICE officers what they can do when people don't open the doors or try to evade their arrest? So I simply asked DOJ, give me a legal opinion, because every Department of Justice will interpret things differently. What is the legal opinion on impediment? And we'll see what happens.
What a bunch of dumbasses. Yeah, really.
Ukraine suffering a 1-2 punch at the hands of the Trump administration, with President Trump speaking to Vladimir Putin of Russia before speaking to Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, also inviting Putin to the White House. That is not an invitation he extended to the Ukrainian president. That second blow delivered here at NATO headquarters in Brussels by Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary. Hegseth not making a forceful statement in support of Ukraine, instead saying Ukraine needs to abandon its goal of recovering all the territory it has lost to Russia since 2014, and it needs to abandon its dream of NATO membership as part of any peace negotiation. Now, that is causing real frustration among the NATO allies here. Speaking in unusually blunt terms, the German defense minister accusing the Trump administration of making concessions to Putin before these peace negotiations have even begun. Hegseth was asked whether the United States was betraying Ukraine. He denied that. He pointed to the billions of dollars in military support that the United States has provided. But there are big questions about whether that support will continue going forward under President Trump.
Here now to discuss the chances of a real resolution or truce is Fred Kemp. He's president and CEO of the Atlantic Council, a CNBC contributor, and I believe he's on the ground in Munich at the security conference. Fred, welcome.
Yes, that's where I am, Kelly. It's good to hear from you. And I just came in town from Dubai, so I've been in the Middle East this week as well.
You know, there was some reporting that European leaders were caught off guard by these potential peace talks, but Trump has made it very clear, even on the campaign trail, his efforts would be to kind of resolve this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's right. You get two responses, and they're different in tone in the Middle East than they are here in Europe. The one is that this is really promising because you need to deconflict great power conflict. And he can diffuse it because he's pragmatic, he's transactional, he non-ideological, he'll get the deal done. And then and that's in the Middle East with Iran, that's here with Russia, that's also with Asia, with China. The downside, the people who are pessimists about this say that he's not thinking of second-order consequences. He's could make a deal with Russia that would go over the heads of Kiev, that would only encourage Putin to go in the wrong direction. And of course, here in Munich, you have a lot of history in the background. In 2007, Putin's speech here, which shocked everybody, was really the beginning of his revanchist turn against the West, ending in the war in Ukraine 2 years ago. And now people who were born in that year in 2007, boys in Russia are going to their deaths in Ukraine, and it all started here in 2007. And then, of course, in 1938, Chamberlain appeased Hitler. And so everyone here is knowing that this is going to be a historic moment this week, but is it going to be one of a positive nature or one to be more concerned about?
We turn now to the breaking news tonight. Top U.S. officials are set to head to Saudi Arabia for talks to end the war in Ukraine. Sources telling ABC News that Secretary of State Marco Rubio and others are expected to meet with top Russian officials. It's unclear if Ukraine will join them. Here's ABC's Jay O'Brien.
Tonight, nearly 3 years after Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine, sources telling ABC News top Trump administration officials are now traveling to Saudi Arabia to try to jumpstart peace talks between Moscow and Kyiv. The trip expected this week. Sources telling ABC News Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and Middle East Special Envoy Steve Witkoff are expected to meet with Russian officials. Ukrainian negotiators not expected to participate at this point. President Volodymyr Zelensky saying today,
maybe there is something at the table, but not on our table. So I didn't see any invitations.
Just days ago, President Trump speaking by phone with Zelensky after a 90-minute phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
We had a great call, and it lasted for a long time. I think President Putin wants peace, and President Zelensky wants peace, and I want peace.
Trump, who long promised to end the war, also asked if he views Ukraine as an equal in these talks.
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed.
French President Emmanuel Macron will host European leaders, including Britain's Prime Minister, on Monday for an emergency summit on the Ukraine war. The hastily arranged meeting comes after U.S. officials suggested Europe would have no role in any talks on ending the conflict. Leaders from Germany, Poland, Italy, as well as NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa from the European Union are expected to be at the summit.
So, happening today, French President Emmanuel Macron is holding an emergency summit to discuss President Trump.
At least 7 key European allies, along with NATO and European Union officials, are expected to attend this hastily arranged meeting.
They say it's not an emergency meeting, but it certainly is hasty and impromptu. Alex Hogan is live in London with the latest. Alex.
Hi, good morning. So as Trump's team holds these meetings with Russian officials, European leaders are quickly scrambling to hold a meeting of their own on the war in Ukraine. And it was French President Emmanuel Macron who called for this emergency meeting, which will be taking place at Paris's Élysée Palace this afternoon. He's going to meet with the leaders of Germany, Britain, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, Denmark, as well as the NATO Secretary General and the European Council President and the European Commission president. They're going to tackle how to respond to the fast-moving pace of the Trump administration, something that came as a shock to many of these European leaders. Washington's shifting priorities, efforts to bolster defense spending, and the big question of sending troops to Ukraine after a ceasefire. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, in an op-ed, indicated for the first time that the UK could send British peacekeeping troops to Ukraine, writing in part, "I feel very deeply the responsibility that comes with potentially putting British servicemen and women in harm's way, but any role in helping to guarantee Ukraine's security is helping to guarantee the security of our continent and the security of this country." He went on to say that it is only the U.S. that can deter Putin from attacking again in the future. His spokesperson for his office says that he will be meeting with Trump within the week. And the prime minister also went on this morning to say that this is a once in a generational change to the security and strategy here in not only the UK, but around the continent as well. Guys,
That's right.
To you.
And Alex, as the United Kingdom has said, we would be interested in perhaps sending troops as some sort of a peacekeeping force in Ukraine. It sounds like that's putting pressure on the other European allies and partners to do the same. England's going to do this many. Hey, France, how about you?
Absolutely. This is going to put pressure on all of the other European allies. We know there will be more meetings that follow this specific meeting. But in that letter, in that op-ed that the prime minister wrote, he did make mention to say that, look, Trump has a point here. We need to improve our security. We need to show the U.S. that we really are making a change here. And he says that's exactly the message that he's going to bring to Paris later today.
For so many years, the Democrats were screaming Russia, 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 trying to implicate President Trump in that ridiculous Russia collusion story. All of those years, they missed the aggression of Communist China. All of those years allowing Communist China to roll over the United States. We are now more than 2 years after the Chinese spy balloon surveilled the United States. And now we've got even a better idea of what that spy balloon was carrying inside and sending it back to Communist China in real time. A new report finds that it was loaded with U.S.-made technology from at least 5 different American companies, including communication modules, other sophisticated surveillance equipment. The balloon, of course, was shot down over the North Carolina coast after traversing the country for a week. Joe Biden finally decides to shoot it down when it gets to the Carolinas. As the House Foreign Affairs Committee finds, Beijing invested more than $10 billion into the Caribbean since 2005, including a massive port just 87 miles away from Florida. Gordon, we've talked about this is the Chinese's MO. Acquire land near military bases, lend these countries money that they can't pay back, like in the Caribbean. And then once they can't pay it back, China takes over the area, including ports, which are incredibly important. My question is, you say that this has given China undue influence in the United States. We're seeing a rise at Chinese nationals at the border as well. So the threat is real, and we understand it. But for years, the Biden administration played it down. The Democrats have been playing it down. Remember when that spy balloon was traversing across the country, and they said, oh, no, it didn't send anything back. That was a lie. We know that it did send it back. But they misled the American people, again, even about that. Why?
That is a great question, and I don't know the mentality of the Biden administration. But certainly General Mark Milley, just before he left his post as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, actually gave a public interview and said that he did not think that China sent anything back from that spy balloon, where we know that it in fact did, because subsequent reporting said that was clearly the case. And of course, this balloon had communication modules. This was, I think, a failure of the Biden administration to understand the threat posed by China, because I think Biden felt that he could accommodate the Chinese ultimately. And I think that was wrong, because the Communist Party has made it very clear. It has declared a people's war on us. They define that as total war. We have Chinese migrants in our country who are surveilling our military bases. It runs through the list. The signs of attack are obvious, and the Biden administration clearly failed to understand what was going on. Trump's taking a different view, and that's very good.
When it comes to our national security, there's no question that the Chinese Communist Party is at the top of our adversaries list. They're working to become a global superpower. According to the FBI, China has tried to influence our lawmakers and also public opinion. They've also been accused of stealing intellectual property and committing cyber attacks. It appears the CCP is still employing these kinds of tactics. The Daily Caller News Foundation's Phil Lenzicki is out with a new story titled, quote, "A defense contractor that supplies parts for American military aircraft and advises the U.S. government on supply chain security is owned by an immigrant with extensive ties to the Chinese Communist Party, intelligence, and influence agencies," according to a Daily Caller News Foundation investigation. The name of the person in question is Jerry Wang, the CEO of S&L Aerospace Metals. S&L specializes in making things like landing gears and hydraulics. They serve clients like Boeing, Lockheed, and Raytheon. They work on both commercial and military aircrafts. Joining us now to discuss is Phil Lenzicki, who writes the Department of Defense has awarded tens of millions of dollars in defense contracts for fighter jet attacks, helicopters, and guided missile launcher parts to S&L Aerospace Metals, a New York-based company that serves on the Department of Homeland Security on critical manufacturing. Phil is here with us, as I just said. Thank you for coming on Rising.
Thanks for having me so much. Yep.
So how does a person like this with ties to our adversaries end up working so close with important military private companies that provide military contracts for military equipment? That seems like a major red flag.
That's really the $1 million question: is how could this have happened? The individuals with whom we spoke told us that essentially the Department of Defense, the vetting process for defense contractors boils down to little more than the honor system. It's a self-disclosure system in which these defense contractors will, identify their own potential vulnerabilities. And after that, there's maybe just a perfunctory, cursory review of those disclosures, and then they are let into the system.
You know, my head pretty much exploded just now when you said that the vetting process amounts to little more than the honor system. This is not a red flag. This is like 5 to 10 red flags. The fact that people who have to do with manufacturing parts, that our military, our young men and women are going to be flying these planes. And the fact that they could be sabotaged so easily, this is absolutely horrific. And the fact that it took the Daily Caller to find it out also says a lot. So thank you for exposing such profound malfunction and danger within an institution, which, as we've talked about, there's a lot of diminished respect for anyway.
And that's the game!
You've disconnected from the hive mind. Explain.